Segment 2, from print to digital. Two sets of figures. Jerry, this is for you first. The first set of figures from September 20th, 2007, just over a month after the News Corporation purchased the Wall Street Journal. And the second set of figures from March 31st, 2011. Weekday circulation of the Wall Street Journal in 2007, a little over 2 million. Weekday circulation of the Wall Street Journal in March 2011, 2,100,000, a slight increase. New York Times in 2007, a little over 1 million. This year, just barely over 900,000, a decrease of about 8%. Now, what happened to the New York Times, losing circulation over the period, is the case for each of the top 10 circulation newspapers in America, with the single exception of the Wall Street Journal. How do you do it?
I think we've done it through, I would say, a couple of things. I mean, first of all, we started off talking about the inbuilt dispensation in the media towards a liberal view. And let me stress that what we do at the Journal and the news pages of the Journal is we don't try to lean against that in terms of pushing the news pages of the Journal to the right. We see, in fact, a fantastic opportunity there, since more or less every news organisation, I shouldn't say every news organisation, but the major news organisations lean in that direction. We believe, Robert Thompson, the editor-in-chief, and I, his deputy, and the other senior editors of the Journal, believe there's a fantastic opportunity there for us to play it straight. I mean, to be genuinely objective. I mean, to be, or at least, that may be too much to ask of anybody, but to be closer to objective than any other news organisation can be, and I think we've succeeded in
When you say
that.
fantastic opportunity, you're talking about a fantastic commercial opportunity.
Yes.
So you're back in business in one way or another.
Well, that's a good point. But I was actually thinking more of an intellectual opportunity, actually, and of the pursuit of truth. We haven't got on to why I ultimately... And by the way, again, having said some rather cynical things about journalism at the start, I do agree with Andy. There is actually, I honestly believe, I really believe the calling of journalism is, and I would say this particularly to young people, I say it to my daughters who I hope perhaps might even go into journalism themselves, is magnificent. The opportunity, the role that journalists
I'm checking
play.
Andy's face because I don't recall his saying that he's encouraged his two children to go into journalism.
No, well, I'm sort of in two minds about that too. But look, the opportunity, what journalism stands for, the ideals of journalism, the opportunity to tell the truth to explain to people what is going on, to expose wrongdoing, just to give people a deeper understanding. It is, I mean, I studied history. I love history. I actually studied philosophy, politics, and economics. A lot of it was essentially as you did, I think, Peter. A lot of it was historically based. I love history, and it is that old line about journalism being the first draft of history. That's what we. So I think to bring it back to the Journal, that's I think what we try to do daily. We try to give people, instead of that kind of view through a prism of liberal or indeed even conservative bias, we try to give people, with all our imperfections and all our frailties, the first draft of history of what happened today.
All right. We now have a nice statement of a kind of concern. No, not. You were careful not to say conservative. We have a nice statement of a kind of idealistic motivation for being a journalist. Now business. The old model, newsprint, supported by ads, largely classified ads, in the newspaper business is collapsing, right? That's a fair statement. Okay, watch this clip. Steve Jobs.
My beliefs very strongly is that any democracy depends on a free, healthy press. And so when I think of the most important journalistic endeavors in this country, I think of things like the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and publications like that. And we all know what's happened to the economics of those businesses. And some of them are in real trouble. So even more than magazines, I think some of these newspapers the news gathering and editorial organizations are really important. I don't want to see us descend into a nation of bloggers myself. I think we need editorial more than ever right now. So anything that we can do to help the New York Times and the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and other news gathering organizations find new ways of expression so that they can afford to get paid, so they can afford to keep their news gathering and editorial operations intact, I'm all for.
Nation of bloggers. I'll come to you in a moment. I'll let you meditate on that. Maybe there's a Buddhist.
Here we go.
But is the iPad going to save you?
I don't think it's going to save us. I think it has clearly given us an additional opportunity, additional platform, to use the dreaded sort of technology term that everybody uses, to bring our journalism to people in a more convenient way. Look, obviously print is challenged. Even you're very kind to point out that our print circulation has held pretty steady over the last few years as other newspapers have declined. But we know we're not starry-eyed about it. We know that over time print is going to continue to decline. So we have to find ways, and we are finding ways at the Journal. I'm glad that Steve recognized that in those remarks, that we are finding ways all the time at the Journal to make sure that we can bring our journalism to people in a more convenient modern format, which we do all the time, and the iPad is part of it.
So your notion, what I want to hear is a kind of a read of your serenity level. Charged with one of the great journalistic institutions in the country, the Wall Street Journal, things are in hand. Is that your feeling? That you're experimenting with new digital platforms, that the Journal has a large number of subscribers by, it's going to be all right. In your mind, you've got some period of time, a decade, when print will phase out. It's all going to happen in hand. It's under control.
No, I don't think I would dare to go that far. We're in an extraordinary period of churn. I mean, technological churn is a feature of dynamic capitalist societies, and it's been going on for a long time. We are in one right now, which is really, really continuing to disrupt our business. I cannot tell you what the Wall Street Journal will look like in 10 years' time. I really can't. It could be predominantly on iPad. There'll be successor devices to iPads, and there'll be all these other mobile devices and everything else. I have no idea. What my job really is much simpler in a way. Is simply to focus on getting the product, getting the content right, getting the journalism right, and to make. And I really
are an idealist, Jerry. Well, what you're saying is that if you deliver the news, if you build it, so to speak, they will come. You will be able to find an audience. That the platform is secondary to the product.
I do think that, yeah. I think that that in the end, what Jobs said is exactly right, that we don't want to be a nation of bloggers. There is a demand for authoritative, objective, fair, well-sourced reporting on what's going on, and I think that's what we do, and we'll do it in whatever format it takes.
Andrew Ferguson, open your jacket. 1, 2, 3, 4 pens.
I have a hamster in here, too, if you'd like to see.
You strike me as a man of the 19th. I know you well enough to know, Andy, that you feel a great spiritual affinity for pen and paper and books. You've just heard Jerry. You've heard Steve Jobs. Let me hit you with another one. As of this past spring, Amazon announced that it was now selling more e-books than hardcovers and paperbacks. How does this make you feel?
Well, I'm thinking purely in terms of personal greed. I don't quite see how ebooks will support people in the way that books have almost supported some people. It really does. I don't understand the business model. I'm not very good at that, thinking that way, but it just doesn't seem to add up to me. The one thing about this, the nation of bloggers idea that Jobs mentioned, and that people fail to take account of, I think, is it isn't just a technological development that all of a sudden we have all these blogs and people are relying on blogs in ways that of course they didn't before. I liken it a little bit to the failure of the mainstream churches in America, which is the reason there was a huge rush to evangelical churches was because the mainstream churches failed in the duty in the promises they made to their parishioners. The mainstream media in the United States failed to live up to its own ideals, and that's why people went off in the direction of these blogs. Now, there are many problems with the nation of bloggers that we've become. One is it's self-perpetuating. People tend to only gravitate to news or views that they agree with, and there's sort of Everybody goes off to their own corners, which is a bad idea. And finally, it's parasitic, which is why what Jobs said is so important, that there has to be a host for these parasites to feed off of.
The host original news gathering.
Yes, somebody actually having information.
Right.
Now, I think if the Times or the Post had kept their balance as, moderately liberal newspapers, I don't think that you would have seen this rush to blogging as much as you have. But the fact is that they became ideological organs as much as news gathering organs.
Okay, so here's the moment when I wax portentous, or a little more portentous than usual. Quick story. This is in my mind because I have 2 children at college right now. When I was an undergraduate, I made a little extra money one spring by working reunions. When alumni came back to the dorm where they were staying, I would hand them the key to their room. When they went out to a party, they would leave the key with this one, and I had a shift that began in the evening and went until a little after midnight. I did this job for a week, and I read a book a day. And so did everybody else who had the job. We were bored. There was nothing else to do. You had to read a book a day, roughly. 30 years later, I go back for my own reunion at the same institution, and this system is still in place. And all the kids have laptops, and they're all watching movies. And I'm not sure that's progress. What do you reckon?
You are such a reactionary. I'm so...
All right.
Well, no, you see this on a plane. Haven't you noticed this on planes now when you walk up and down the aisle instead of people...
They're all watching movies,
reading
including
a book
me,
or a
actually.
magazine.
Yeah.
Or even worse, and this is what's really frightening, you see people just staring at the back of the seat right in front of them, and you're thinking, what is going on in their heads? They don't even watch a movie. So.
They're imagining.
All right, so
They have one in their own head, yeah.
All right.